progresses, like she's just feeling it. And I loved it. It was no disrespect to her. I
Well, it's hard to
can't.
stay focused. It gets a little stony.
Yeah. I couldn't do it if I was recording, but I always respect people. So yeah, I
have
obviously love the plant.
Have you seen the was it getting getting Doug with High podcast with Doug Benson?
No.
Oh, you gotta check it out. So Doug Benson is a
Yeah.
comedian. He's a big advocate as well,
Yeah.
and he's got a podcast, and it's called Getting Doug with High.
I love
and
that.
and the whole premise of the podcast is having actors and celebrities and all that, and they just the first thing they do is like,
Get
okay, it's
high.
420, they get high, and they attempt to have a podcast in his basement
Wait,
while they're
that's
all
so
getting
good.
started. It's hilarious. You've got to check it out. It's
Okay, I'm
funny
gonna
stuff.
check that out. Good plug.
On that note, this is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Shayda Torabi.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about cannabis and entrepreneurship and everything in between.
How's it going? Yeah, so I guess we'll start right there. So for those who don't know you, you're like kind of the queen of CBD in Austin, Texas, and tell us about your company and your podcast and what you got going on.
Yeah, I'm based in Austin. I've born and raised in Austin, so I'm very proud to be a Texan. And if you are familiar with cannabis in any capacity, you know that Texas is like slow to the game. We do not have legal marijuana, and we have a very, tiny but mighty medicinal program. And we are fighting every day to have better access for this plant in all of its capacity. But we have a very exciting hemp market, and I am very grateful to be operating a business in that industry here in Austin. And so, a little bit about our story. I am the co founder and CEO of Restart CBD. We're a women owned, sister owned CBD brand. We have a brick and mortar here in Austin. We also operate in e commerce. So, I ship products nationwide. I sell pretty much everything: topicals, edibles, smokables, sublingual oils, pet products. And we're really grateful that we've been in business now going on 3 years. We're definitely a pillar in our community. And our whole goal as a brand is just to help destigmatize and help our community have a better understanding with cannabis. But to kind of back up how I got into that position, I am a marketer by school, by education, by passion, by trade. I love specifically brand marketing. I love experiential marketing. And so I went to college and got a degree in marketing. And then I got my first job out of college, and it happened to be with this little small tech startup at the time. I joined as employee 13 called WP Engine. So if you're really nerdy and you know what managed hosting is, and if you know what managed WordPress hosting is, kudos to you. If you're not, it's a company that powers sites to be online. And so my background really is digital technology marketing. It was a whirlwind of a company experience because when I joined, I didn't realize that the company would be in hyper growth mode for pretty much the duration of my tenure there. So I was with them for 6 years, joined as employee 13. I was their office manager turned marketing manager turned product marketing manager. So I wore a lot of different hats, but also got to be a part of a lot of the company's growth as kind of fulfilling the marketing role. We went from 13 employees to, over 600 employees during my time there. We expanded from Austin, Texas to San Antonio, San Francisco, London. We had an office in Ireland. And I really got to be a part of watching a company be built from the ground up. So that entrepreneurship kind of spirit was really alive in my day-to-day life. I was watching my peers, our leadership, my team put ideas together, put it out into the world, and seeing it be received and reciprocated. And so it was just a really good, company to be a part of. And that really for me helped lay the foundation for everything that I get to presently be doing in my life. During that time, I got to travel a lot in my role, would go to events, evangelizing on behalf of the company, setting up our booth, creating swag, creating content, creating all these touch points for consumers to interact with our brand. So again, I feel like I got a really good blueprint of how to go actually execute and operate a business and taking it from zero to something. And so I was with the company for 6 years, had all these different roles. And it was during my time at the company that I was in a very unfortunate car accident. I was hit by a vehicle as a pedestrian, and I fractured my pelvis in 2 places. And it was extremely excruciating. It was as uncomfortable as it sounds. I'm obviously talking to you today, so I did survive the accident, but it it left an impression on me in the sense of I was confronted with chronic pain at the age of 25 and had to go into, quote unquote, the system for recovery. So that meant going to an orthopedic surgeon, getting steroid injections every time the pain would flare up, obviously being prescribed pain medication and prescription pills, going in and out of physical therapy over the course of 8 months plus. And I'll highlight kind of, the narrative being I've been a cannabis consumer for 15 years. So yes, I reside in Texas. I consume high THC in states where it's legal, but had been a fan of the plants so much so that I'm very blessed. I have an open relationship with my family and had my parents' support during my recovery of the accident. That my mom was actually the person who approached me and said, hey, you're obviously in a lot of pain still. The medication, the injections, they're not really fulfilling, relief for you. And have you heard of CBD? And now, again, to kind of paint the picture, this was like 2015, 2016. CBD is now everywhere, but it really wasn't back then. And so it was so foreign to even me being a cannabis consumer. I didn't know what CBD was. I didn't know what CBD was in relationship to THC. I didn't know what the hell an endocannabinoid system was or how these cannabinoids would work with my body. I was very blind to the science behind cannabis and was really skeptical, to be honest. I was like, I smoke weed. I'm probably getting enough CBD. You're crazy, mom. And my mom just kept petitioning. Hey, try CBD, try CBD. I finally gave in. And within 3 weeks of getting on a high dose of CBD products that my mom was home making for me, essentially, I started feeling relief in my body. And I'm sure people listening who might be experiencing chronic pain, the feeling of what it's like to be in your body and to just become numb to dealing with the pain. It was almost like I just became a non-believer, like nothing was ever going to make me feel alive again or make me feel comfortable in my body. I was just always going to have this pain in my hip and my pelvis. And it wasn't until after I started taking CBD that I really started to realize, hey, this isn't an end all be all plant. This isn't a magic pill plant, but wow, this is a plant and not a pill. And if I take enough of it under certain, circumstances, different doses, different consumption methods. So at the time I was using a sublingual oil, a topical, I was vaping it. I was giving my body these different ways to consume it that put me on this path of recovery of like, wow, this cannabinoid and this plant obviously has a lot of medicinal properties. And so as a family, we became really big believers of CBD, but again, there wasn't really a market opportunity for us to go to market with a brand or product. So had this background helping build someone else's company, had this experience with the cannabis plant, but I ended up leaving that company, going to another company that was not necessarily the right fit for me or them, but I was there. And it was during that time that my sisters and I put our heads together to ultimately launch Restart CBD, but launch is a strong word. There was no like, we're going to be business owners. We're starting a business. We're going to go all in on this business, Restart CBD. No, I was working for someone else full time. I totally subscribed to the don't quit your day job for your dream job. And I was business as usual. I was working for someone else, trying to hustle on the side, trying to just kind of, make a website because that was easy for me coming from my previous job. It was, how can I get online and create content? Let me make a social media profile for Restart CBD. But it wasn't until I got laid off from that job that really propelled me into entrepreneurship. And so I say it because that's the reality. Sometimes people glamorize entrepreneurship like, oh, you had this amazing idea and you quit everything else to pursue it and you fell into entrepreneurship or you dove into entrepreneurship and it's all been, blue skies and rainbows. And that's not the case at all. It was very, embarrassing for me to be laid off from my job. Despite having had a background growing someone else's company, now I was in the driver's seat. It's almost like, I used to equate it to, I've never skydived, by the way, but, you practice, you prepare before you actually go skydiving. And so I equated it to, I had practiced these things for someone else, but I had never done it myself. And here I was literally getting kicked out of the plane. I wasn't necessarily ready. Thank God I had some training to be a little bit, prepared for it. But really quickly, kind of got my footing as we were establishing the business and just ended up finding so much, so much like embrace for our brand here in Austin. And so we launched Restart CBD officially in August of 2018. To give the listeners some, spectrum, hemp is federally legal in August of 20, or I think hemp was federally legal in June of 2018. We launched in August of 2018, and Texas didn't go legal until the following year, 2019. So there were some moments where it wasn't quite legal. We weren't really sure what the law was going to be, what the accessibility was going to be, if people were even going to be receptive to this. And so it was a little bit of the wild, wild west. I mean, now you can kind of reflect back and see, obviously CBD is so prevalent. It's in juice shops, it's in coffee shops, it's in every, beverage at the grocery store, basically. But back then it was still very foreign, and a lot of people were very concerned and confused that CBD was equal to THC and could potentially make you high. Now, that's not the case at all. The quick and dirty of it is cannabis is the parent plant. Hemp and marijuana are two subsets of that main plant. So essentially same species. Hemp is classified as anything with less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC, and marijuana is classified as anything higher than that 0.3% Delta 9 THC. So there's definitely some stigma still around the plant, but that really was something that my family and I felt called to do when we were, kind of leaning into building Restart CBD. Of just, I'm a spiritual person. So for me, it was like, for such a time as this, like, obviously the accident was super unfortunate. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but the accident is really what introduced me to the benefits of CBD. Having a background in marketing and technology really helped set us up to kind of approach and navigate some of these nuances in the cannabis industry. And we love cannabis, like, really, truly. My family, my staff, my team, like, we love this plant, and we want to help our community, specifically in Central Texas, have a better understanding of it. But obviously want every citizen of the world to see this plant as a plant, as the potential of something that can be seen as an aid, whether you're wanting to take it for something more medicinally or something just to chill out at the end of the day. It's like, the amount of negative attention this plant has gotten is very unwarranted. And so we have to do a lot of work to kind of chip away at that as time goes on. And so that's kind of like, the beginning story of how we got here. I'm a marketer. I love cannabis, had a really unfortunate accident that propelled me into, the CBD endocannabinoid system of it all. And really grateful to be operating in Texas, because it is super stigma in America, but in Texas especially. It's just something that we have to have that conversation with daily with our customers.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of stereotypes still out there, for sure, especially in the classic Bible Belt, because obviously us being here in Georgia, we deal with a lot of the very similar issues. And it was really the Farm Bill Act, was that allowed for the production of hemp and the CBD industry to really establish itself. Was that a federal thing, or was that a state by state deal? I mean, that was the case with Georgia. Do you know if that was a federal thing or?
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to highlight. Federally, the Farm Bill passed in 2018,
That's what Farm Bill.
essentially legalizing the production and growing of industrial hemp. But similar to kind of, how we're seeing marijuana laws come out, it's not federally legal marijuana, but states can go have their own laws. So just because federally it was legal, Texas still decided to have its own hemp laws. And so Texas didn't pass their hemp laws until 2019. So a year
That's
or
what
so after the federal law. So that's where, there's still a lot of nuances around it. FDA has a lot of, comments around incorporating cannabis or CBD into beverages. There's still regulatory departments who are trying to navigate. Like in Texas, we're dealing with a smokable ban potentially, where you can't consume or retail sell smokable hemp in the state of Texas. And to me, smoking is one of the fastest ways to consume this plant and feel the effects of the plant. And so as a marketer, it puts us in a compromising position of, how do I interpret the law for what it is, and how do I navigate it to ultimately help educate my consumers and provide high quality products for them to have access to, that live up to the potential of the plant.
Well, and not only that, but even like as a someone who like is an advocate or somebody who feels very educated in the field, like what we're learning now over the last 5 years in this industry has really changed a lot too. Like even understanding the difference between THC and CBD, and now understanding, but now the difference between Delta 9 and Delta 8. And that's something I really want to spend some time with because I'm still learning that. And that's definitely even that Delta 8 is really the new wild west of the wild west, if you will. And
Amen.
but all of that aside, I'm curious from like your perspective and starting your business, um, figuring out how, because with CBD, like you said, it's kind of the wild west, and you're figuring out how all this stuff works. So you knew the marketing aspect, and you had background in the startup business aspect of it. But what about the actual product and the manufacturing of the product and going through that? Because there was, even now there's so much discrepancy in price point
So
being a big
much.
part of it, of like how a quality CBD product is developed versus something that you just find in your local gas station or whatever. Um, for you as the small business person, what was the product that you knew you were going to go with first, and how did you go about finding the right manufacturer that's doing the right things, that's giving you the quality product that you need?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few ways for people, again, for listeners to kind of understand how a product ends up on a shelf. So there are white labeling opportunities where someone essentially is making the product completely, and then you are putting your own label on it and then selling it on a shelf. You can wholesale distribute other people's products. So someone else is making the products, their own label is on it, and then you're just the retail dispensary putting the product on your shelf. Very similar to how grocery stores operate. They're
Right.
not making all those products versus, maybe you go to a Whole Foods, and Whole Foods obviously has their own brand of stuff. Um, and so we as a brand, because my mom was already kind of playing around with making me products when I was going through the accident, she had found some sources that she found to be trustworthy. Trustworthy is a loose word because there are now checks and balances to that, meaning you can get the product tested, you can see the potency, you can see the quality. We've learned more, what is a good chain of custody in terms of how the raw materials are sourced and created, how products are extracted. That's really key in the industry now. And so when we first launched, again, my background is I love cannabis and consume a lot of cannabis. My middle sister now, she's a former University of Texas swimmer, collegiate athlete, and she's a current Under Armour sponsored athlete. She does not put THC in her body. She does now because she's no longer under, some of these
NCAA.
collegiate rules.
Right.
Exactly. But at the time, she was more hesitant to CBD. And what we were observing on the market was there are products called full spectrum. So they will
Right.
contain the full plant. Again, no more than 0.3% THC, but including THC, CBD, and then a plethora of other cannabinoids. And then there were these products called isolate products. So just CBD isolated out as a cannabinoid, and nobody was really selling isolate products. And we saw an opportunity to come to market with an isolate based CBD product through some of the sources my mother had originally found when I was using the products to recover from the accident. And so we decided that we were going to make a line of sublingual tinctures that were isolate based. And part of that was because of my sister's influence. We knew that if there were full spectrum products on the market, even if it's a trace amount, it can make you fail a drug test.
Right.
And so we knew that there were people out there who were really hesitant to CBD because of the THC. They didn't want to get high. Even the trace amount is not going to get you high, but it could make you fail a drug test. And so we saw an opportunity. I wouldn't say that we were pioneers. I mean, people were also kind of coming to the same conclusion in the industry. But if you really look at the cannabis industry, it's very immature. And so you kind of look around and you're like, oh, I mean, now it's much more saturated, but I'm talking, 2017, 2018, nobody was talking about CBD. So there was no real source of truth. There was no industry standard. It was just kind of like, oh, well, these people are making these products, and oh, well, here's another way to make or get CBD. So one of our suppliers essentially was providing isolate. And so we make our own oil. So we small batch manufacture. So I don't white label. I don't close my eyes and buy someone else's products and then put my label on it. And no disrespect to people who are doing that. There's a lot of successful brands who are doing that. But unfortunately, it's a crapshoot unless you're really doing the due diligence to ensure that the person that you're purchasing from is ensuring that the product is what it says it is. You just have a lot of discrepancies. And I think that's what cannabis in general, but CBD especially, is facing right now. The market is unregulated still today in 2021, which means just because a product is being sold at Whole Foods, just because a product is being sold at the gas station, just because a product is being sold at a CBD dispensary, there's no real credibility or quality check. It really falls to the owner who's putting that product on the shelf. And so for us as a small family brand, we saw the power that we had of, well, let's give people this isolate product. And so we launched with isolate first. We did 4 different strengths because to me, and really, if you look at the industry, dosing and how many milligrams you take is the biggest and best lever for how effective a cannabinoid product can be for you. 5 milligrams of CBD versus 100 milligrams of CBD is going to feel different in your body for most people. Again, not everybody's body is going to respond the same way to it, but that to us was where we saw an opportunity to lean in. How do we help educate our customers? So we started putting, the dosing of CBD on the front of our bottles, just over and above, going beyond. Again, there was no regulation saying your label has to say this, your ingredients have to be this, you have to use this source, this quality. So we kind of set the quality. We kind of set what we wanted to establish for our community and our customer base. And so we launched with isolates. Then we expanded into full spectrum products. Then smokable hemp became a very big deal. We expanded into smokable hemp. Then vape came along. Also in there were pet products. We have a very popular pet product line that we've had kind of since the beginning, because people, very similarly to humans, wanting to find relief for the same things, kind of most people, the 3 things they take CBD for is anxiety, pain relief, and better sleep. Your pet, obviously, with the fireworks and storms and people, feels anxiety from time to time, and maybe they're getting old and their bodies are aching. So people like to give it to their pets as well. And then you touched on Delta 8. Delta 8 is a new cannabinoid. So very similar to how I was highlighting, we isolated CBD out originally. Delta 8 is now an isolated cannabinoid. So you're seeing a lot of Delta 8 products on the market. Delta 8 is a THC. And because federally the law says Delta 9 THC is illegal, there's some call it a loophole. I would probably agree with that, which is why you see Delta 8 thriving right now on the market. But for example, states like Texas are trying to nip that in the bud. So we are in our current legislative session right now. And I was just at the Capitol a couple weeks ago, and in a bill that they're proposing, it would be to outlaw Delta 8 and now Delta 10. So they're having specific calls in these bills to target these newer isolated cannabinoids. And I say newer, meaning these cannabinoids have always existed. They didn't appear overnight. They didn't come out of nowhere. They've always been a part of the cannabis plant, but they are minor cannabinoids. And so that's kind of where some of the, mystery of Delta 8 has come. It's like, well, how do you get Delta 8 and where did it come from? And so it's a minor cannabinoid. It's more man-made essentially, because it's found in such trace amounts that it doesn't grow like on weed, like you would smoke flower and you feel high. That's because there's Delta 9 present. You're not going to find flower that's high in Delta 8. That's just not scientifically possible in the present
Same thing with
scheme
CBD,
of
right? Like
everything.
when you're getting the CBD flower, it's just sprayed with CBD, right? Or treated with CBD as
That
a,
is
like Delta 8.
incorrect.
No, that's not. Oh, okay.
Incorrect. Yeah. So CBD actually is found in marijuana, but kind of the way that it goes is the higher the percentage of THC, the less CBD is present in the plant. Now, again, with science and genetics and cultivation, you
Right.
can start to kind of tweak things out. And so I imagine one day eventually we'll see some of these cannabinoids be found more abundantly naturally. But CBD is found in hemp, which is why hemp is so popular. CBD grows in higher percentages organically in hemp. I'm talking 7%, 13%, 20% CBD. So you do
Gotcha.
find flowers that have CBD. And now, even in the marijuana market, you're observing they're, again, cultivating those marijuana plants to have higher percentages of CBD naturally.
Like
But you
that
did,
Charlotte's widow or Charlotte's for like treating Charlotte's Web or whatever.
yeah. So Charlotte's Web is more of a sublingual oil. So they're actually extracting the CBD from the flower, making full spectrum oil, but it's all from hemp. So they're a similar brand in a sense of like the world that we play in.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I thought I meant the strain, not the brand. But yeah, anyway, got it.
There are different strains, and
Yeah.
for sure certain strains will have different percentages, and so that's where I think
Because
consumers get
Delta 8 comes
educated.
from hemp, right? Delta 8's coming from, that's not coming from marijuana. Delta 8's coming from hemp, just like CBD, like the CBD that you're getting where you are, in order for it to be legal, it's got to come from the hemp plant, correct?
So it can come from either plant, but you said the key word legal. So legally, Delta 8 to be legal has to come from hemp, but you can get Delta 8 from marijuana. It's a conversion essentially. So basically, people are taking CBD and they're changing the isomers. So it's isomerization. And that's how they're converting these cannabinoids into other cannabinoids because they're all molecules. They just have
Right.
different
Yeah.
setups.
I
And
have
so
no idea, but that gets way
I don't even,
outside my
again, and I don't want to pretend to be any, expert on that either, but I hope the listeners can take away. I try to come from a place of education and everything I share is thoroughly researched and educated, but I always welcome room for further education, correctness, and just, especially as the plant and the industry evolves and we get more research,
I was gonna
there's
say
more to be understood.
we're
So
learning a
we're
lot every day.
yeah, yeah. And so nothing I'm saying should be like, that's the Shayda said this, but you could say, hey, Shayda said this. Now let me go jump off and look for more, follow up research and
Yeah.
reports and stories.
Well, the Delta 8 stuff is fascinating because like it wasn't even on the horizon a year or two ago. Like, I mean, even like CBD is still young too, but like this Delta 8 in particular, the difference between Delta 8 and CBD in my mind is I heard it phrased as like Delta 8 is kind of like the Bud Light of marijuana, essentially, like above getting high, if you will. So it's almost like it's a really it's a quasi or a legal, like in Georgia, Delta 8 is legal at least at the moment. So it's like it's a legal way to kind of experiment with marijuana and experience what that high is like, as opposed to CBD. Like you can do whatever you want with CBD, you're never going to get that quote unquote high experience.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the point with Delta 8 right now, especially in states like Texas, where they're
When they're
like,
trying to
wait a
make it
minute.
legal.
Yeah, we outlawed Delta 9. So what are you crazies doing now with Delta 8? And my kind of point slash argument to that is, yes, is it a loophole for some states that don't have legal Delta 9 to provide a psychotropic effect to consumers? Yes. But I can tell you, as a retail owner who physically is in her shop every day and she hears and talks to her consumers, I'm not just blindly selling them Delta 8, being like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here's, a legal high under the
Exactly.
table. I'm saying this is another cannabinoid. Treat it as a new cannabinoid in your body. See how this is going to make you feel and what is the effect on your body. And so many people started telling me, whoa, I love Delta 8. I can't handle Delta 9. I like the effects of Delta 8 way more. So to me, it's no longer a substitute, it's a preference. And so for people to come at it and say, oh, this is just because you don't have Delta 9, it's like, maybe, but also let's give some credibility and merit to the cannabis plants. There are over 150 cannabinoids.
Imagine
150 of
what they can
them.
all do once we've explored them all and
Thank
figured them all
you.
out and checked them
And
all out.
let's
Yeah.
not forget terpenes. Terpenes play a major role in the effects. So it's like I talk to some people sometimes, if you've ever just had pure THC, without anything else, it's a very dull experience. It's not a pleasant high. The reason people like the way marijuana makes them feel is not exclusively because of Delta 9. It's because of the combination of cannabinoids and terpenes that encompass and wrap that experience to ultimately give you that effect. So now you're looking at the hemp CBD market open up. And I have been a marijuana consumer for many, many years and never knew, thought, realized to question why I feel a certain way when I smoke a certain strain. And now that you see hemp opening up and you're actually allowing federal legalization for hemp, and we can do proper research on this aspect of the plant, you're uncovering and discovering so much. We're having much more educated conversations. Again, I've been to over 50 dispensaries. Nobody ever sat me down and was like, here, this is THC versus CBD. This is your endocannabinoid system. This is a terpene. They said, here's weed. It's legal. This weed has 17% THC and this weed has 23% THC.
If you're
Which one do
lucky.
you want? Yeah. Do you want indica sativa hybrid? It was a very kind of one dimensional conversation. And when hemp hit the market, you started having consumers who were like, wait, I actually want to know about the quality of the product. I want to know, who's the farmer? I want to know what pesticides are they using? Are they using pesticides? What's the extraction method? How is this going to interact with my body? How many milligrams should I take? Like you have a much more educated consumer now embarking into cannabis that prior to hemp legalization, it was weed's legal in California. Weed's legal in Colorado. Weed's legal in Oregon. Let's go smoke weed. And so it is really exciting as a true cannabis consumer who very much came from that culture of it to really see the power of getting research anecdotally, scientifically, exploration of this plant to help destigmatize it. And I always love to highlight too, you might not like to get high. That's okay. You can experience cannabis and the benefits of cannabis without being high. You
Yeah.
don't have to smoke it. You can use topicals. You can use edibles. There's so much more accessibility to this plant now that it's really exciting to be able to have these conversations because in my retail, we launched the brand to kind of paint a little bit of a picture. I'm in my early 30s. My sisters are in their mid to early 20s. So we're millennials for all intensive purposes. I have a background in digital. So I come from social media world, online, email marketing, this, that, and the other. So when we launched our brand, I was like, oh, we're going to make a brand for us, for people who are maybe familiar with cannabis, but maybe they don't want to get high. They want to just find the benefits of CBD. They want to have, relaxation, recovery after a workout, stressful, corporate jobs, blah, blah, blah. And what we found after launching was I have more 55 plus people coming to me. I have more parents and grandparents referring their children to me than I could have ever anticipated or imagined. And it's because it's a lot of people they come from maybe, the drug prohibition era where it was like, I don't want to touch drugs. They are now prescribed XYZ medication. They're tired of it. They're in chronic pain. They're aging. They want to enjoy their quality of life. And they've heard CBD can be a key to unlocking that. Wow. Okay. Well, let's have that conversation. Let's flip the narrative. And so it's not that it's exclusive to any one particular demographic, but I personally am seeing a lot more of the baby boomer generation become open-minded and adopt and accept this plant. And so it's been really fun because you really are seeing, I remember we had like recently opened. So this was kind of back in like 2018, 2019. And we had a group of like they had to have been like 65 plus women. I think they were like in their 70s. 4 women who were like having a girls' day out and they heard about CBD and they wanted to come get educated. And so, a little bit about our brand too. We are an education first brand. We love to educate our customers. We create content to help make them feel more educated. We have an environment in our dispensary that makes you feel welcome. Do you want to come in? And so, as such, my sisters and I have been coined the CBD Sisters. So people have now become aware of that. And so these ladies come in and they're like, we want to be educated by the CBD Sisters. We came in and you're just like hearing their stories. They're like, we've never smoked pot. We're a little anti-weed, but we're open to cannabis. We want to learn about it. We don't want to get high. So what can you tell us? What can you educate us on? And just being able to kind of meet people where they are, help them understand, again, given like the current spectrum of like everything that we have access to about this plant. And so my job is not to convince someone smoke this or consume this amount, but really try it and see what your body responds to. My job is to make you canna curious, be comfortable easing into trying cannabis. And it's not going to work for everybody. And again, not every cannabinoid is going to work for everybody. But that's the beauty. There's so many different products. There's so many different cannabinoids, combinations of terpenes, ratioed products, that there's a little bit of something for everybody, that hopefully people can start to really find the beauty of this plant.
When you were coming off of your accident, what was the induction method or combination of induction methods of the CBD products that you found worked best for you personally?
Great question. So I am a smoker. I love to vape and smoke cannabis. I'm not a smoker in other senses, but like for me, smoking cannabis is like my preferred method. As I age though, that's changing. And so I can go on a tangent on that too, because I think your body, as it changes and grows, be open to different consumption methods. And so back then I was vaping. And so my mother was making me homemade vape because, like I highlighted earlier, there's this word called bioavailability. It's not unique to cannabis. It's a scientific word. It just basically means what your body is going to absorb. And so when you smoke something versus you eat something, your body's going to absorb those differently and at different rates. So let's say if you inhale 10 milligrams of CBD or THC versus eating 10 milligrams of CBD or THC, you would feel them not only time-wise differently, but you'd also feel the effect differently. So for me, I wanted that fast relief. And so I was vaping CBD products. My mom was making me homemade vapes. And because I had impact on my body, this is a question we get a lot, of what is the right approach? What is the right product? Anything that you're ingesting is going to work from the inside out. So smoking, edibles, sublingual oil, capsules, anything you put on externally, like a topical or a patch, is going to be working from the outside in. And maybe not is going to penetrate as deep enough as an inhalation or an internal consumption. So I was internally taking a vape. I was externally using a topical, and then I was also using a sublingual oil. Yep, like a cream, like a salve. And so putting it on the spot.
What's a sublingual oil? What is it? That's a tincture?
A tincture, yeah. So that you would put under your tongue and let it absorb under your tongue.
Do you consider that the absorption, or do you consider that the internal one, the tincture?
I consider that the internal. So that's anything that you're going to like put inside your mouth, inside your body, that's internal. And so I like sublingual oils. They're not as, absorbent, bioavailable as smoking, because smoking is you're taking that breath of air, you're inhaling, it's hitting your lungs, versus sublingual oils being absorbed under your tongue. Right. But to me, the most medicinal approach, meaning if I told you, hey, you need to take 20 milligrams to start, that's like a good starting dose. You can pull droppers, like their dose per ml. And so you can pull a dropper to a certain amount. Our droppers are calibrated.
You'll know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, this is 20 milligrams.
As opposed to an inhale, you're kind of
yes, when you inhale, it's very difficult to know how much you're getting. And so I kind of try to steer people based on what's their personal preference. If you tell me you like smoking and you're looking for something fast acting, I would say try inhaling a vape or a flower. If you're telling me you want something fast acting, but you want to avoid THC, I would say, why don't you try an isolate sublingual oil? You're telling me you have tennis shoulder, tennis elbow, something externally on your body, I might say, try a sublingual oil and a topical approach. The beauty of it, and hopefully this is what's coming across, is there's not one end all be all. And so for people who are looking for a transactional approach to cannabis, like, okay, I take this pill and I feel this way, you can fine tune that once you try different products. Like now I've been a consumer of CBD going on, 5+ years. and THC going on 15 years, I know how much my body can handle of any one of those consumption methods. I know how much I can layer on. And so now when I'm in pain, when I'm stressed, when I'm having a funky day and I need a mood boost, when I'm at the end of the day and I want to get ready for bed, I know what cannabinoid to pick. I know what consumption method to pick, and I know how many milligrams to consume. So that's my mission, is to get other people comfortable to navigate that, because it isn't just here, smoke this joint and all your problems go away. Well, what are the terpenes? What's the ratio of THC to CBD? What are you trying to take it for? Those are questions that, consumers should be asking, and hopefully they're finding a resource who's knowledgeable. Again, I'm not the only smart person having these conversations. There's a lot of people having these conversations, but unfortunately, I don't see everybody who's selling these products having these conversations. So that's kind of the gamble you're taking when you purchase a product from a gas station or a grocery store. You're not getting the education, and there's just no way of really telling really truly what's in that product. So it does leave consumers in a little bit of a, how do I navigate this?
I'm fascinated that your mom was making all of this stuff. So was she making the tincture? Well, you said she was making the tincture. Was she making the topical and the vape? How is it? So were you getting the? And I don't want to. Maybe this is. I don't know if this is out of line or inappropriate thing. So are you getting CBD in like this, like a powder form that she's like cooking up on the stove? Does she have like a little? So because
Yeah,
I know like
basically.
the vape pens. I mean, that's got to be like a bit of a process, right? Like, I mean, a bit of a
There's
thing to
yeah,
get
there's
to.
definitely like more systematic ways to make it. So to also clarify, I sell a bunch of vape. We don't make those vapes. A
Right.
manufacturer who's
How could you
extracting,
possibly keep up? I mean, that you
yeah,
have to
is
have a whole
making those
facility, right?
vapes. Yeah.
It's not
But at
mom
the
in the back room
time,
with the
no.
cooking with like making spaghetti, like a big
Yeah,
planch
she's
at the
like, okay,
top.
dinner's ready, your CBD's ready. No, but at the time, if you really like Google how to make a vape product, unfortunately, they're made with ingredients called propylene glycol, PG, and VG, vegetable glycerin. Those are really what allows the product to be vaped and to have a smoke effect. And so those are, over the counter ingredients that you can find. And yeah, there's definitely different ways to get CBD. There's powder form, like you highlighted, there's liquid. And so it's just finding the right combination and the right ingredients to make a vape. So it was very kitchen homemade concoction, but it got the job done enough for me to feel the effects and benefits. That, yes, now from a market perspective, there's people who manufacture and do it consistently, and quality assurance and all those things. But
Well, I'm
yeah, it
super
was a little
impressed with
bit.
your mom that she figured all that out. That's really, I mean, the topical stuff, maybe that's kind of like in my wheels, but like to make a vape, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's pretty
My
impressive.
mom
Like
is
she's getting all.
she's a crafty woman, and she is like, so, I don't want to say my mom's like anti-medication, but she's very conscious about it. And so
That's nothing
growing
wrong with
up,
that.
yeah, like growing up, it wasn't like I wasn't allowed to have Advil. I absolutely had like Advil, Motrin, whatever. But she observed, oh, you got your wisdom teeth out. They just prescribed you Vicodin. Well, you don't need to be taking Vicodin a lot, because that can cause other problems and addictions. And so she was just very good at observing how detrimental some of these medications could be. And now, again, I'm not a doctor. Nothing I'm saying is like medical advice, but obviously medicine has a place in our lives. I am on some medication. I'm on birth control. I'm a woman. I want to regulate that aspect of my body. So I'm not like anti-medication. But when you look at like managing chronic pain, so looking at my accident, it was, well, I don't want to be on pain medications forever. I don't want to have to go to the doctor and get shot up with a steroid injection, which, by the way, was not even, it didn't even work half the time. I remember leaving the doctor's office after getting a steroid shot and being like, okay, like, it's a gamble. Is this going to take, effect today, or is it
My mom
not?
went
And
through the exact
so,
same thing.
it's just one of those things, like, eventually you're going to have to do something for your body. My hope is people see CBD and cannabis and cannabinoids as a piece of that,
Yeah.
as a piece of unlocking that. So it really
Well,
is
the
just
biggest thing
figuring
with the
out what
steroid is
works.
the steroid is a band-aid. The
Yes.
steroid is not fixing anything. It's not addressing anything. It's just masking. It's just it's just dealing with, and so I wanted to ask you though, so when you had your car accident with the hips and everything, um what was your relationship with opioids through that experience? Were you able, being a cannabis user already from the outset, were you able to steer clear of the opioids altogether? Did you ever develop any kind of dependency or relationship with that drug? And or because the biggest thing that the biggest one of the problems I see with cannabis is the fact that it accentuates opioids, or it can accentuate that experience. So was that the deal with you, or were you able to kind of just deal with it head on?
I definitely used my opioid prescriptions as prescribed by the doctor. But what I think people don't realize is pain is relative, right? And so I finished my, let's say, prescription. And so I was 8 months post accident. Like I had gone through physical therapy. I started, if you kind of dig into my journey, which anybody listening, if you just Google Shayda Torabi, you'll see a crap ton of content and information that I've produced over the years. And so for me, the accident, I wasn't the epitome of health prior to the accident. I was a food blogger prior to kind of getting into being more cannabis content creation and stuff. And so I had gained extra weight by being sedentary from not being able to walk for a month and not being able to move my body. That it was really important for me, despite being in chronic pain, to get my life back on track. And so I was going to physical therapy. I was taking my pain medication. I was changing my diet. I went completely paleo during that time. I started working out. I started lifting, doing squats, lifting weights, being active, but still having chronic pain that wouldn't go away. And again, it kind of became normalized for me. It was like, oh, well, if I wore the wrong shoes or I stood on the hard surface too long or I sat on a bench too long, my left side of my body would flare up. And so it's like, okay, well, at the end of the day, then I'm going to go grab my pain medication, maybe going to go to the doctor this week and get a steroid injection. The point is, when I ran out of those things and I was still in pain, it was really easy for me to go back to my doctor and say, I'm still in pain, help. And he would be like, well, prescription, refill. I remember having a conversation with him kind of at that time, which is why CBD got introduced. This is really, truly why CBD got introduced. I went back to the doctor. At this time, I had started working out, changed my diet, was eating clean, being healthy, all intensive purposes, was like on the road to recovery, but still dealing with chronic pain. I'm like 26 years old. And I go to the doctor, I get scans, and he's like, well, it seems you still have a tear in your body, despite, all the recovery you've tried to do. Well, crap. What do you do about that? He goes, well, we can have surgery. We can go in and we can try to repair the tear. And that's an option. Or you can keep taking pills, or you can keep getting steroid injections and slash just live with the pain. And my mom didn't like that. My mom was like, there's no way you're going to go have surgery. Surgery is going to cause further complications. You're 25 years old. You're super healthy for, every other aspect of your life. This could cause other implications with your health. No freaking way are we going to do surgery. And so that was really the motivation for my mother to be like, wow, I don't want my daughter to keep getting in this rut and this cycle of, I'm healing my body, I'm feeling better, but like, oh, I stood on my legs too long at a conference and a trade show, because I used to do trade shows and I was standing on my feet all day. Like, oh, that made my leg flare up, my hip flare up. She just was watching this happen and she's like, there has to be another way. And so you kind of mentioned, some of these things being band-aids. I don't think that CBD is, again, the end all be all, but in terms of something that's over the counter that I have access to, that is plant-based, that works in my body, a cannabinoid, your body has an endocannabinoid system. Your body responds to those cannabinoids. It has receptors for it. When I take this, I feel this way. I know how I feel when I'm in pain and I'm not in pain. So
It's a solution.
that for me was the unlocking power of, well, maybe, the pain medication, the Vicodin makes the pain go to 10, it numbs me completely. Great. Maybe the CBD makes the pain go to a 30 or 40. Wow. Well, being a 30 or 40 and not being numbed out and it being something that I can routinely keep in my system is much better for me to pursue than me keeping and going and numbing myself out. So I didn't have a problem necessarily, but a problem could be persistent because of just, and no offense to the doctors and medical professionals, that's just what's in their toolkit.
It's all they have access to. Yeah.
And so, yeah, unfortunately, depending on how old you are and what conditions you have, medication is kind of, required. It's necessary. But if you can avoid medication and you can avoid being on some of these prescriptions, I think that that's going to allow you to live longer and have a healthier life. And so if you can supplement it with cannabis, that's a great, step. One thing I want to plug, just because I'm sure people are going to be like, because like we get asked all the time, well, I want to get off my medication and I want to try CBD. I'm not a doctor. I cannot advise you to get off your medication at all. But there is a really great resource that we just became a member of and a partner with, and they're called leaf411.org. And they are a nurse staffed cannabis hotline, free chat, free phone service. They're nurses and they research cannabis, and they are more than happy to have these conversations specific to your needs. And so that's just what I hope people take away is cannabis is this really powerful plant. It's going to interact with everybody's bodies differently. So start low and slow, try different consumption methods, try different doses. But ultimately it's your body, and you have to kind of work through how that interacts with your body for better or worse.
Yeah. Well, what's cool is that I said solution. Really, it's a long-term solution. And the Vicodin stuff and all those and any of the opioid-based drugs, that they are temporary solutions. They do, like you said, deal with what you got to deal with, but for the time being, but they're not a long-term solution. And the fact that there's a resource out there that can help provide access to that kind of information is phenomenal. We'll have a link to that in the show notes for sure. Just kind of, you've also got, speaking of all of this cannabinoid stuff, I mean, and cannabis stuff, you've got a big week. This is the week of 420. First of all, we should give a big shout out to 420 right out of the gate. But this is a big week for you as well, because you've got a big cannabis event going on starting this weekend, is it?
Yes, yes. I want to highlight it is 420 for those of you who are not familiar or just think that it's a day for us to all get stoned. It's much more than that. It's definitely evolved for the industry, but really specifically for me and my family and team. It's a day for us to be proud cannabis consumers, to help destigmatize the plant, to help educate. And so I really appreciate you giving me this platform to talk about my favorite plant and hopefully helping some people be disarmed in regards to cannabis. And so that's what I hope 420 can continue to champion, is just being curious about the plant. And so I'm very excited. Yes, kicking off on Monday, April 26th until Thursday, April 29th. Mr. Willie Nelson himself, the, king of cannabis and country. He's a Texan, and he is putting on the first of his brand's cannabis summits called Planting the Seed. It'll be virtual this year, and he's got just a great lineup of panelists and hosts, and Nathaniel Ratliff is going to be kind of the MC of the event. If you're familiar with his music, he's definitely a big personality, and Willie Nelson has a good range of friends in the industry who are going to join and participate in this high holiday, as they're calling it. But yeah, I'm very grateful to be a part of it. I am moderating 3 different panels, and if you want to join in, tickets start at $10 and they can be purchased, and more information can be seen at lucksummit.com. And the event really is to help promote Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project. Again, it's really just to help educate and inform people on the current status of cannabis, specifically in Texas, but also nationally, and just help be a point of discussion and dialogue and excitement for the plant. And so, yeah, I'll be moderating a panel on cannabinoids. So getting into more of the nitty gritty of some of these cannabinoids we talked about, like CBD, Delta 8, but also CBG and CBN and Delta 10. And then I'll be doing a panel on terpenes. So a lot of times people talk about indica versus sativa as an effect. As a marketer, we use those words a lot. Unfortunately, they're really limiting, and they're not the total picture when it comes to exploring and experiencing cannabis. So if you're curious what that means, you definitely want to check out the panel on terpenes. And then I'll be wrapping it up with a panel kind of, on the many other uses of hemp. So obviously we talked a lot about consumption and personal consumption, human consumption, medicinal consumption, recreational consumption. But hemp as a plant actually has so many uses, from fiber and fabric and oil and building materials and hempcrete, wood. Like there's just so many other applications. And so we'll be talking all about that as well, and just really want to help educate the community.
Well, that's one of the things I love about it is it's such a sustainable, renewable resource. I mean, that at its core really resonates with me for sure. And that's going to be such a cool event. And you're right, there's so much to learn, and there's like, even I consider myself a pretty educated person in this arena, but just the amount of information that has come out in the last year or two or three, and constant evolution of the science, and now we're finally getting to see some research being done. It's just opening up this whole new world of possibilities and stuff, and to be on the forefront of that is it's really got to be pretty exciting.
It is. I'm never thought little Texan me growing up would ever see the day of being able to work in the industry in my home state. And obviously getting to be a part of Willie Nelson's event just helps magnify the impact that we're able to have here in Texas and beyond. And yeah, I'm a humble girl who, like I said, this whole time, I love this plant. It's really changed my life in so many ways. And I will spend all the days of my life helping other people feel empowered by it. And so I always like to make myself available too for those listening to reach out, to ask questions, to, if you're in Austin, Texas, or you're ever visiting Austin, Texas, come see us. If anything, just to get educated and take a picture in front of our, cannabis green wall at the dispensary we've got. But yeah, I just grateful to be able to champion this plant to anybody who wants to hear about it.
Very cool indeed. Well, oh, I had a great little segue that I was going to smooth right into that for a closeout to give you a chance to plug everything. But oh yeah, so well, I'm a big believer in, you know, not necessarily we like find our passion and go do what work that you love or whatever, but a lot of times we kind of get our calling, and a lot of times that calling kind of comes about as a result of all the things that we've done along the way. I mean, that's definitely been the case for me. Like every job or experience that I've had is all fed into what I'm doing now. And that's clearly the case with your background in marketing and your web design and your social background, to be able to put that all into this thing that you're now so passionate about, something that you clearly love and means the world to you. And the fact that it's all about doing it for others and educating, and it's like all the blocks are just filled. It's like you're checking all the boxes. You're doing it. This is the purpose. This is the dream. This is the journey. This is the saga that makes life so exciting, so great, that it makes it worth living. And the fact that you've been able to identify it, you got to figure it out this early on in your life, and now you've got your sisters involved. It's like, there you go. You're on the right track. You've found your, like I said, calling is probably a cheesy word for it, but your path, if you will. Very
Feels
cool.
very fulfilling. Yeah, thank you. It's by no design other than God himself. I can't credit, anything that has happened other than just being very receptive and very open and leading with a heart of gratitude. So again, my goal in life is just to leave the world impacted for the better. And yes, my calling is cannabis. And so that is what I hope I get to leave a legacy for. And it is very, very fulfilling. Absolutely.
So we talked about the retail location. Now's your chance to plug everything. Let's talk about where you're located. People who are in Texas, they want to come find you. And obviously, let's get into a little bit of that social where they can see all the great content. We barely even touched base about the podcast, but you have an amazing podcast out there that's all within this world as well that people need to go check out. So tell them where to find you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'll start with Restart CBD. We're pretty much on every social media channel under the name Restart CBD. So on YouTube, if you want to watch us, we put out a lot of, educational video content. We're on Instagram. If you resonated with some of the, legal side of the industry that I've been touching on throughout the discussion, I do pride myself on being very involved in cannabis politics to the degree that I'm allowed to be involved here in Texas. And so I talk about it. I talk about legalization. I talk about decriminalization. I talk about, accessibility and all these things. And so our social media channel is really the best place to get the latest and greatest news on kind of what the pulse of cannabis is. And so we also have our website, restartcb.com. We have all the products like we've been talking about, I ship nationwide. And then, yeah, if you're in Austin, you can come visit us. We are in North Austin by the domain, and you can Google Restart CBD. We just have one location. You can come see us. So that's our CBD brand. And then I am also, yes, the host of a podcast myself called To Be Blunt Podcast. And it is a cannabis and marketing podcast. It's definitely geared towards the industry, but I have a lot of consumers who listen to it because, again, I bring in guests from all different aspects of the industry. Most are not even from Texas. So I really do a great job, I think, of bringing together a good array of people from different aspects of the cannabis industry, from California to Colorado, from bud tending to dispensary ownership to CPG brand building through some of these leading cannabis brands. And my podcast is available on Spotify, iTunes. Just search To Be Blunt and look for my face and name, and you'll see all the great content that exists there. And then lastly, you can catch me. I'm really social on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I'm under my personal name. So on Instagram, I'm at the Shayda Torabi. And then on LinkedIn, just search for Shayda Torabi. And I love to connect. I love to answer questions. I love to talk, obviously, and just share my story and point of view. And so there is a lot of content out there. So don't hesitate to look into it, keep researching. I hope that I left you with some curiosity. And so that's just my hope is to keep the conversation going and give people, different points to reflect on. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate that. And the podcast is fantastic for understanding where we are today, like getting that latest, greatest news, understanding the state of that's what I've really relied on it for. Because like you said, there's so much new things coming out, so much new information to try to stay on top of, or try to just even be aware, just to educate yourself. And that podcast has been a tremendous resource for me personally for that. I
Oh,
love it.
thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, so last two questions, I'm gonna let you go. So this one's fun and hard. The other one's easy and cheesy. So, but it gives you kind of time to prepare for the second one. So, if you had a billboard for all the world to see, this one you kind of already know going into it. So, if you had a billboard for all the world to see, what would you put on it? And then, what's your favorite item under $100 that you could not live without?
Ooh, okay. Under $100, I feel like I'll start there.
Usually that's the one people need to think about. Usually that's the one, but usually people know their billboard, but I mean, hey, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like $100. My phone is obviously much more than $100.
Cheaper the better.
For me, it really is about de-stressing at the end of a day. Cannabis in particular is very charged and it has a lot of sentiment around it. And so unfortunately, cannabis, that's what, yeah, exactly. It's one of those things like, yeah, I literally use my own product to help me feel better. And so I would say, yeah, every night before bed, I eat a Delta 8 gummy. It gives me the best night's rest and helps me just go into a cozy slumber. So
Any
I wake
brand
up feeling,
you want to promote?
I use our gummies, Restart CBD's gummies.
Oh,
so
well,
we sell different,
beautiful.
yeah, we sell different milligrams. Like I've been talking about in the episode, different strengths. So I personally figured out my strength is between 10 and 25 milligrams of Delta 8. Again, I encourage you to start on the low end. So I really just stick to kind of like 10 milligrams, unless it's like I can sleep in the next day because it makes me groggy sometimes. But for me, sleep is the best reset of life, and being able to leverage, again, cannabis to help me manage that has been really transformative in helping me wake up to face navigating all the things that happen in the cannabis industry. And then on my billboard for all to see, I would have in big, bold letters the words "show up." And that's because I think that so much of my success in life can be credited and traced back to me showing up despite being uncomfortable or scared or unsure, and just championing and pushing through some of those situations has certainly made me stronger. And so people obviously, ask all the time, how do I get into cannabis? How do I become a business owner? How do you grow your business? I say, show up. And the good news is you get to show up every day. Again, same thing with kind of reflecting on sleep. Every morning is a new morning. How are you going to spend those, 12 to 15 hours? What are you going to do? How are you going to leave the world? And so that's, my message, my championship is just to be present to your life and show up.
I love it. No, that's perfect. Well, and I love the sleep aspect because that has always been the most important aspect of me doing athletics and endurance sports and stuff like that. Recovery is so important. So that
Absolutely.
sleep and getting that good solid sleep is just, it's so important. And I see like that's, if people struggle in one area, that's usually the first area where they're struggling. And whether it be CBD or Delta 9, Delta 8, like that resource for sleep to me is just like, if you're struggling, that's just a great place to go. And I, like you said, knowing that like the edibles in particular have such an amazing impact on, like they'll just knock me out. Like I said, they'll just take you down if you're really looking for some solid sleep. And it's, you wake up just feeling so well rested and so recharged. And that's why I wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning every day, ready to go and ready to,
Yeah.
because
It's
I get that good
transformative. It
solid
just
sleep.
empowers you. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Shayda, thank you so much for your time. I know you got a lot of preparation to do for all the other talking events and all the speaking engagements that you've got coming up with this conference. And I'm looking forward to checking it out and looking forward to continued success and watching this industry evolve, watching your podcast evolve, and watching your business grow. It's going to be a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much, Nate, for having me. Thank you, listeners, for tuning into this episode, and hope to connect with you guys offline for sure.
All right, cool. We'll talk to you soon.